Yo, what's up everyone? This is Valoramous. In today's DJ tutorial, I'm going to discuss where to set your cue points. Now, I've previously covered this topic in other videos, but I wanted to have an update because everyone's system differs, and then sometimes your process, your system changes slightly throughout the years. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the general types of cue points that I have, and then maybe provide you a few additional pointers on how to better use your cue points. So the first cue point that I always have is going to be where I plan to mix in that track. It is not always the first transient of the track. It is not always the first one beat of the track. It really depends on where you plan to start that track. But in general, it is going to be either a vocal, the first vocal part, or it's going to be the first drum, the first beat, or it's going to be the first transient. It really depends on the track. And I can't explain that better, but you're gonna have to make this determination for yourself on where you want to start tracks and then what type of a DJ you are going to be. Are you a scratch DJ? Well, then you're probably going to want some sort of vocal or like a drum. If you are an EDM DJ, you are probably going to use that first transient because you're gonna be conducting longer transitions. But open format DJs are gonna have maybe tighter mixes or shorter mixes, and they're also gonna have shorter time in between tracks, so basically shorter transitions and also shorter time playing each track. So that is going to alter where you start this first cue point. But that first cue point I have in red, and that is on the DDJ 1000 with Rekordbox DJ software. The second cue point is, for me, is always the first break where I want that track to be playing exclusively. So that cue point is in blue, and that is generally going to be the first beat of that first verse. And that is when I want that track to be playing exclusively, and the outgoing song should be completely removed from the mix. Now, cue points 3, 4, and sometimes 5 are going to be the choruses or the drop sections. And if I can jump between, and this is a tip that I would save for the end, but I'm going to discuss now. If the drops or choruses are the exact same, meaning you could toggle between each drop number 1, drop number 2, drop number 3, or chorus number 1, chorus number 2, chorus number 3, or climax number 1, climax number 2, climax number 3. If those are the same, I will make sure that I label that cue point with the same color, which for me could be purple. So purple would be, that means I can toggle between these 3 drops, choruses, or climaxes. Now, a tip for this is to apply some reverb or delay right as you're approaching that first purple cue point or first drop, climax, or chorus cue point. And when you apply reverb delay, it's going to phase that out. If you have the quantize button hit, you can then jump to the next drop section, and you can effectively skip half the track. And this is a insider tip, insider trick for DJs on how to move quickly through your tracks and not bore the audience. Now, cue point 5 or 6, depending on if there's 2 or 3 drops or choruses or climaxes, is going to be that outro section cue point. And that is when there's usually a just drum section only, but not always. It really just depends on the track. But if there is a drum only outro section, you want to use that, make use of that section, because that is an ideal time for you to mix as the DJ. Now, cue points 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9 are going to be miscellaneous cue points for me. I may have a cue point where I plan to initiate that mix, and this could be a dark blue cue point. That's where I plan to initiate the mix. It may be halfway through that final drop if it's an EDM track per se. So if you have a 16-bar EDM drop, then halfway through that drop at the 8-bar mark or the start of the 9th bar, where I plan to start the next track. And then the final cue point I'm going to have, which could be cue point 7, 8, or 9, depending on your cue points. But usually you have 8 cue points in DJ 1000. It's going to be cue point 8 for me. It's going to be the last one. It's going to be an active loop, which means that when the track arrives at that part, that loop will activate and it will not turn off. I would have to deactivate the loop in order to progress through that section, but I will generally not do that because that's where I plan to actually conduct the transition of the mix. So that'll be an orange cue point, and you can set the active loop within your Rekordbox DJ software by clicking the little arrow button above it, and then it'll go from a white color to a red color. When it's red color, that means it's an active loop. When it's white color, it means it's a passive loop, which means you would have to manually activate it. So there you have it. Those are the general cue points you could use in your sets. It really just depends, but you can hear that there's a transient here, and then first beat of the first verse here, and then drop, outro section, loop. few examples. Now, obviously you don't know that track, but you can hear the different energy levels. The first beat of the first verse is a quieter section, less energy, but the drums are usually in, or there's vocals. That's the first verse. The first cue point is where you plan to start the mix of that track, so that's going to be up to you. It really just depends. And then you heard the more energetic sections, which were the climaxes or choruses or drops. And then you had an outro section, an active or passive loop, and then you may have other markers throughout the track when you plan to start mixes in your song. So there you have it. If you have other tips or tricks for setting DJ cue points, please leave those in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.